everybody. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Capital Link. It's fantastic to be back home for Posidonia and such a full house. Such an honor today, such a privilege. I am Dora Mace-Kokota. I'm a partner and the global head of the Maritime Trade and Offshore group that we launched a month and a bit ago, so it's all very new. We are now housing under one maritime roof about, 60 partners today, as Peter Theochari joined us today, and his first day in the office is here, and over 100 lawyers around 8 different offices around the world. George doesn't need an intro. He's got his own speed in life. He's got his own orbit in life. I think he creates his own orbit in life.
Thank you, Dora.
I had the pleasure of spending a little bit of time with him last week, and he took me through certain highlights. I think they were fascinating. I think they're a testament to who he is, what he has achieved, how he has got here. And so I was thinking that for today, maybe we try and connect a little bit of the past with the present and a bit of the future.
You only have less than 40 minutes.
And I will do it in 13 minutes. So bear with us. Well, we will get there. Reflections of a pioneer. You told me last week that we cannot really tell what the present is and what the future will be unless we know the past very well. So shall we start with the past? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you think has brought you to where you are today. What changed the tide? And one thing maybe that you would have done differently or wouldn't have done at all if you were to look back.
Well, I think it's the PhD that I didn't get, but I had when I was born, I guess, or acquired at some point, which is being poor hungry, and you get a drive, desire, determination, whatever you want to call it. And that's basically it. And then it was acquiring the knowledge. I worked for 10 years for other ship owners. I didn't have the best treatment financially, nor otherwise at times. And then started my own company, and I was always looking forward. And at some point, I succeeded in doing a lot of things. We were the first rival company to go into the stock market, and we moved on. And then, I like to do other things. I like to build things, whether it's in business or in art. I'm very involved with art, but we're not going to talk about it here. And then I was sitting and I reflected and I said, okay, what is the next thing? And the next thing has to do with tech. So I said, what is it that will be improved over time in the tech world? And that's going to be digitalization, tokenization. And my first thought was, all right, I've been in the capital markets. I didn't like the 7% that I had to pay the investment bankers. Sorry, guys. So I said, there's got to be an easier way. And I had this idea of doing something in a digital form. So we came up with a company called Greenseas. It's greenseas.com. You can Google it, you can enter this. And I was looking around, I said, I have to find a way to set it up. And the idea was during COVID, the beginning. So I didn't travel, which was good. I did everything by Zoom. I chose Hong Kong because that was a new market in the sense that it didn't have all the history of the equivalent of the SEC, which is the SFC. And I said, let me try. So initially I was going to be the white paper on somebody else's platform. And talking, and meeting people. There was one guy that had the same idea, but not for shipping. So I said, okay, let's form a partnership. So we formed a partnership. We created a platform which is evident.capital, and that's the start. And then we said, okay, fine. Now, technically, it took us 3.5 years to develop the platform because it's quite complicated. You use all the we used algorithm, blockchain. You can use a lot of things. I'm not going to go into the technical stuff. And then we said, okay, fine, now we need a license to operate. So we started applying to the SFC, which is the Hong Kong regulatory environment. And eventually we got the license in November. We're the first one and the only one that has gone digital in that sense in Hong Kong. So now I said, okay, now is when we get on the boat and we start the sailing trip because it's a long trip.
And do you want to tell us a little bit how it works in terms of the investment part? You said about compartmentalization and tokens. What sort of assets we can have, because it's not only about vessels, right? So do you want to...
No. In the beginning, it was Greenseas. It was supposed to be vessels. Green vessels. I'm not going to talk about it. the LNG is the obvious candidate. We put a ship there, which is called the Fuji. It was the first LNG ship we had. It had a long-term charter, and we put it in at 80 million, which people would have thought is expensive. We ended up selling it for 77.5 2 years later. So the return on investment, you can check it on the side, is 15%, which is the track record that is difficult with fixed employment. And that's my idea of continuing on this Green Seas platform. So, you know, the dream is coming true. And I had a nasty comment, which I didn't quite appreciate, from Nick Tsakos last Posidonia, where I was in the panel. I said, I have an idea. And he said, well, referring to Martin Luther King, you know, the guy was shot, so I'm still here. Hope that I won't be shot because I'm doing what I do. But in any case, moving on, water under the bridge. So the idea is to put other assets, and you can tokenize, you digitalize first, you tokenize, and then you sell, but you have to put assets on, which is a task by itself, and then you have to find the buyers. And you can do it even with crypto. You know, there's a difference between crypto and digital. Okay, digital is the technology. Crypto is what you know crypto to be. And so we do everything. We do the KYC, AML, and so on and so forth. And you can play with it. You can go in capital, in evident.capital or greenseas.com. And eventually, that's where the world is going. I think, you know, even banks start and saying, okay, we need to create digital. And I think if you look 30 years down the line, I won't be here, then it's all going to be, the exchanges will be digital. Well, it's going to be new exchanges, the old exchanges that are going to change is going to happen. So, you know, we're in for the ride. Are we going to make it big? We have one chance, but no guaranteed, but it's fun. Hard work, I mean, a lot of work. I mean, I've spent so much time, that's unbelievable. Which does not warrant the time that I would have spent for investments, but it doesn't matter.
Well, investments. It was reported last week by TradeWinds that the Greek ship owners are heading to Posidonia, have arrived at Posidonia with 183 billion in terms of portfolios, collective portfolios, and obviously you're at the forefront of that.
I think it's more than that, but you know,
well, I think it's the Clarkson's conservative.
Yeah, but they don't, you know, with the information they have, they do a great job, but I think it's more than that. But anyway, it's irrelevant.
How much do you think it is?
No idea. I mind my own business. I don't look at everybody else's business. Okay. Other than competing for the best income. That's the only thing I do.
Well, you're at the forefront of that, for sure. Whatever the billions are, what are the key ingredients to the success?
In general?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the Greeks have the, you know, it's a business that it becomes, you know, after World War II, it's quite relevant in Greece. And they all want to do something. And in Greece, if you're not in shipping, it's difficult to make it big. The tech would be an idea, but, you know, the tech is limited if you stay in Greece. You have to go out. And I'm not sure that they realize how much energy you must exert to go out there and compete with the Americans or the Europeans or the Russians or you name it, to create that. So it's a natural for Greeks to be in shipping, and we will be. I think it's going to be harder and harder to make the money because naturally, you know, the Chinese are importing the majority of the commodities overall, not going into the details. So naturally, they will develop their own fleets. And they won't do it by design, but by necessity. The Japanese did by design after World War II. They built the shipyards to build the ships to carry the commodities. The Chinese will do it, but it's going to happen. So the Greeks will have to go into more sophisticated vessels, maybe, longer-term employments. The returns are going to be smaller, but, you know, shipping is still going to be shipping. We'll need it to go around.
As it was said earlier, it's the most efficient way of carrying goods, and it will continue that way. So there's no doubt about that. Looking a bit more into the future, there was a discussion earlier, which I thought was very interesting, around wider succession planning, the newer generations coming in. And there's a lot of discussion, particularly about Greek family businesses.
I'm looking at George and laughing.
Yes, yeah, and you're laughing, yeah.
He started that. You know, the problem in the Western world is we are delusional. We live in a bubble. And all our kids, irrespective of how much money you earn, are entitled. And that's not easy to get them to follow our steps. They think we are crazy to spend all this time. Even if we are work and family, they still think that they don't want to be in our shoes.
It was more a question about stakeholders and how you keep them happy, but we went into kids, so I'm sorry about that. Mine are entitled
The stakeholders,
as well.
you keep them happy by giving them the returns they expect. Okay.
And how does that work for the future then in terms of succession planning? Is it the listed bit that makes it different for you in terms of the
Well,
group?
there's models and models. I had a long meeting with Andy Dacey. You can ask him, he's done it perfectly.
He's coming on in a minute, I think. In terms of the future again, perhaps you can give us a few words to describe what you think the future of the Greek shipping and international shipping is.
I think we have to keep on following the innovation. The first movers don't usually make money. It's like the hotel. The first hotel owner rarely makes the money. Statistically, it's the second or third. So we have to follow the developments and decide where do we want to get in. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing.
So that's a
some
lot
faster,
of
some slower, but that's life.
So it's a lot about innovation. How do you connect that with the fuel? What are you thinking about the fuel of the future, particularly? Well,
it's a long discussion. We only have 3.5 minutes. We haven't reached peak oil. LNG is definitely not only the transition, but it's going to replace to some extent or a large extent the oil. But the only one but it's never going to happen is nuclear energy. It's the cleanest, but politically it would not be acceptable. Otherwise, there's going to be others that are going to take some part of the fuel oil chain, to run the ships. But it's not easy to say what it's going to be. Say ammonia. Ammonia will not be ready until the infrastructure, to get all that will take forever. LNG started in the 50s. And the whole world doesn't have the ability to use LNG today.
The earlier panel mentioned something that I thought was very interesting about sort of black swans coming into the norm and not really being black swans, just being the normal situation going forward, so that we have a disrupted world.
No, but what we're experiencing in the regulations, all that's not a black swan. Black swan is something that's COVID was a black swan, huge. A war, but it was positive for some of us. But there's always something that's unexpected. A big war between China and the US, which I don't think is going to happen, would be devastating for shipping. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm not in that sphere.
So we're waiting to see what happens. But in terms of, again, sort of looking more towards the future and the younger generations, what do you think is a good piece of advice, and perhaps a few words around risks in shipping?
If you don't love it, get to love it, work hard, and maybe you will be rewarded.
That's about life generally, probably, yeah? I think we have to finish on that.
Thank you.